some point as an endurance athlete, I can guarantee it, you've done a double day. And what I mean by that is doing a double training session. So whether that's in the morning, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, you've done a bike in the morning and a run in the afternoon if you're a triathlete, or you've done a gym session, a swim, whichever combination of things you've done, you've probably done 2 training sessions in the same day, mostly just to fit it all in the week and actually get all of your training done. Whether it's playing catch up, whether you did it deliberately, we're going to talk through how to make the most of doing double days and how you can actually make them work for you as opposed to work against you and just accumulate too much fatigue. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Thanks for everyone who's been watching the video so far, and if you're new to the channel, you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below to keep up to date with all the latest content coming up. Looking forward to making a couple of videos a week as usual. It has been going so far. I've been trying to get them out. So if you do have any topics you want covered, please let me know in the comments down below. Like I said in the intro, today is all about double training sessions, and why I want to talk about it is because I went out and did one myself today. I went out and did some run intervals this morning, some VO2 stuff, some short efforts, 2 minutes on, 90 seconds, minute, 30 seconds, a couple of minutes rest and repeat, or one-to-one work to rest. But then this afternoon, I've gone out and done a zone 2 endurance ride on the bike. Just got out, hour 10, cruising around, just turned the pedals over. Something I then want to talk about today is how do you balance these double sessions in a week? And I've had a few questions prior from athletes and from coaches of how can you make the most of an athlete doing 2 sessions in one day when we're trying to balance, trying to receive an adaptation, we're trying to work the athlete, we're trying to induce a little bit of fatigue because we know that's going to give us a training stimulus, so when we recover we adapt, but then we have to manage how much fatigue we have to manage the time availability of the athlete. You can see how I've just reeled off a whole bunch of complexities to the whole equation, and how can we actually make 2 training sessions happen in a single day, because not everyone has full-time availability where they can do 2 sessions or 3 sessions even for some athletes. How do we actually fit them in and make them work? Really, I follow a very simple philosophy when it comes to this, and a lot of this just comes out of just balancing load and understanding and seeing different athletes react to different types of programming within the week. But a lot of it stems from, first of all, what are our sessions that we're trying to fit in? So are we trying to do some sort of high intensity? Are we trying to do some sort of zone 2 endurance? What is the loading in that like? If our high intensity is a VO2 style interval session today, for me, it's not a massively demanding session. I think I only ran 7Ks in total, and that's including the warm up and cool down. And a lot of that was walking in my recovery periods as well. So overall, I'm not going to be massively fatigued at the end of the session. I'm going to be fatigued at the time, but I've got plenty of rest in there, and it's a really high intensity stimulus. What that then red flags for me is, okay, I've done some really high quality, high intensity stimulus in the morning. I probably can't do much more of that or any more of that in the afternoon or for the rest of the day, because I'm going to be too fatigued from a neuromuscular perspective. So the nervous system's going to be fatigued. Just pushing up to near maximal intensity. So heart rate's up there, 185, 190, 195 beats. Pace is up there as well. I ran some of those efforts at sort of 320, 325 pace this morning. So it's the type of thing that I can't do too much more of that high intensity. So I have to then go and do something a lot lesser intensity and maybe more in that endurance spectrum. So we're just then balancing it out with something that's the opposite. But what I'm also going to do is I'm not going to necessarily go out and do 3.5 hours riding and just cruising zone 2, because that's got its own set of challenges and load in it as well. And what I'm getting at here is we just have to look at what is the intensity, what is the duration or volume, and overall volume. So intensity multiplied by duration gives us volume for the morning session or the first session, and then what is it for the second session. And if you are going to try and cram in 3 sessions, which I probably don't recommend for most athletes, but some professionals, when you got professional hours essentially, if you like, where you don't have to do anything else other than train and that's your job to train, might be a little bit different. For the average person, fitting in 2 sessions, if you're able to get it, you just got to work out, all right, what's the intensity and duration here, what's the intensity and duration I'm planning here, volume wise, how do they balance? Get your intensity done first when you're fresh, particularly something like VO2 style efforts. We need to be on, we need them quality. Again, referring back to that video I talked about, quality of effort is more than is I guess the key to maintaining time at VO2 max to get that stimulus. But also it's a lot more enjoyable when you can get out and do your high intensity sessions when you're fresh. I mean, you get the most out of it, you feel yourself pushing as hard. And it's a good sort of way to start the day, if you like. They're usually a lot shorter, so if you're going and doing it before work, it's a lot easier to get in and then get to work. And then getting your longer, slower stuff done at the end of the day, because we're able to get that done on a little bit more fatigued legs, if you like, or if you're in the pool, fatigued arms. But we're able to get it done on a bit more fatigue because the intensity's down. So we're just kind of ticking the legs over, and it's just all about muscular endurance and just and cruising through. So if anything, a little bit of that long, slow stuff at the end of the day is going to act as a bit of recovery and a bit of a flush out. But then the back end of it, depending on how long you're going for, is just going to give you that muscular endurance. And overall, you're going to be a bit fatigued by the end of the day, but in comparison to doing 2 high intensity sessions, nowhere near. And in comparison to doing 2 long, slow as well, probably nowhere near as well. It's a good balance between. The other way you can look at it in terms of double sessions, and this is probably one of the really common ones at the moment, is doing like a strength session. So when I say strength, I mean gym. I'm not talking about doing a strength set on the bike and things like that, but I'm talking about squatting, deadlifting, if you're doing some sort of bench pull-ups, anything that is gym based to build strength. You obviously know it's beneficial for endurance performance. And again, link that video above that I talked about the benefits of, or why you don't get big as an endurance athlete doing strength training and the benefits of it. But again, I would ideally prefer that athletes, and recommend to athletes, get that done first when you're fresh, because that's going to give us a much better nervous system stimulus, which is the whole part of for an endurance athlete. We're not necessarily looking at muscle size. We're not trying to create muscle damage or a metabolic stimulus in the gym. What we are trying to do is develop a nervous system response and some motor learning. So learn the patterns of movement, get better at coordinating movements and all of our body working together in a very controlled environment, which is the gym, that we can then translate out into our endurance sport later. Doing that first is going to be much more beneficial. We get the adaptation, wait throughout the day, and then you're able to get your long, maybe a long, slow session in. Depending on what you do in the gym, you might be able to back it up with a high intensity. But again, I would probably then recommend, it's always best to do gym stuff and then a longer, slower. It's probably going to be more manageable, but there's no right or wrong. If you're able to back up and recover, and as long as you're doing the right things throughout the day in between those sessions, you should be pretty okay to then back it up and do a quality session in the afternoon. And that sort of leads me into, well, what happens during that middle period? We've talked about time, like balancing sessions. We've talked about when should we have them, the sequencing of them, which should come first, which could come second. What another key factor is the gap in the middle. For example, this morning I woke up, I had breakfast because I like to eat before I go and do a session. Had breakfast, waited a little bit for it to settle, and then went out, did my interval run. Got that done, came back, had a little snack, started working on a bit of rehydration, started doing some work for the day. Got to lunchtime, had lunch. So basically what I've done here is I've allowed a bit of food in, had my run, and then essentially another sort of mini snack. So the meals kind of balanced either side of that first session. I've had a solid meal, lunch in between, had a bit of a snack, and then I've gone out for my ride. So I haven't really hit it to ideally what I'm going to recommend, but I've hit about 1.5 meals between the sessions. Ideally, you probably aim for 2. So if you can go and, if you need to have breakfast and go and do your session, that's okay. You might be close to that 1.5, have a good quality snack afterwards, and then lunch, and then later in the day go for your second session. But in a lot of cases, a lot of athletes who might get up in the morning may not want to go out and eat too much before they do their high intensity session, or eat too much before they go and train. So you might have something small, train, and then come home, have a bit bigger breakfast if you need to, because there's one meal, and then you have your lunch, there's a second meal. Why is this critical? Is because what we have is we have a recovery meal, and then we have a fueling meal. We do the first session, we get some food back in. That is our recovery meal. That's going to get some protein back in, ideally some carbohydrates to replenish the glycogen stores within the body, usable for energy to then work later in the day during that second session. But the protein's going to help with a bit of muscle repair, any damage that has occurred. Also just a bit of hydration, so making sure we get some, ideally, fluid back in as best we can, but maybe a bit of electrolyte if you need it. You might want to get some carbs through a sports drink that's got a bit of electrolyte as well. That gives you a bit of everything. Focused on, all right, how can we best recover from that session we've just done? Then we have our preparation meal, or our fueling meal, which is our lunch. So we want to have lower GI carbohydrates if we're going into a long, slow session. So like today I had a little bit of protein as well, because when we take protein in, we absorb the carbohydrates a little bit better when there is protein with it, rather than in comparison to just straight carbohydrate by itself. So I had a sandwich with a bit of chicken in it, some avocado, so some good fats in there as well, some lettuce, tomato, etc. And a muesli bar and things like that afterwards, just to fuel up. And then that was enough to just have a little quick snack, had another muesli bar, and then got straight into my ride. And I didn't feel like I needed to take anything with me. Took one water bottle with me, didn't have to take any sports drinks or anything throughout the ride. I know it was only sort of an hour 10, which isn't extremely long, so yes, you probably shouldn't really need to be taking too much. But had I not had that lunch meal, I definitely would have got half an hour, 40 minutes in and gone, oh, I'm hungry now, I'm running out of fuel. I just feel like I can't, it's really difficult to start turning the pedals, and I've essentially hit the wall at that point, which is, I mean, we can argue things about fasted training another time, but if in the purpose of what we're talking about here, we really just need some fuel in the body just to be able to get through that second session. Because when you look at the total output for the whole day, it is quite a big output when we're doing one big high intensity session in the morning and then a longer slow in the afternoon. You add them together and that's your total daily accumulation of fatigue, or acute training load, if you like. Then it comes to, all right, well, how do we then fuel up if I then have to back up and do another session tomorrow morning? Luckily for me, I've got a rest day tomorrow, so that's great. I don't, but if athletes do then have to go maybe tomorrow and they're doing a swim first thing tomorrow morning or going out for another run, whatever it may be, how do we then prepare for that? And the 2 meal rule, if you like, or you want to call it, still applies. It's you go out and train this afternoon, that's your second session for the day. You then come home, you have something to eat afterwards, ideally, and then you get into your dinner. Good quality sleep is obviously the bonus of being able to then train the next morning. So good quality sleep, and then ideally eating something before you then go and train again is what you need, because it's that preparation meal process again. So the dinner is recovery, a breakfast or a light snack in the morning before you go to your training session is your preparation meal or your fueling meal, and then you get into your session, you just repeat it as a cycle. For most people, it's not going to be double sessions every day, all day, for 7 days a week. Most people, it's going to be maybe like a day today where I had a double session, but then tomorrow I've got a full rest day. So it's not as strict in terms of that regime of following 2 meals, 2 meals, 2 meals, 2 meals. I can get away with it a little bit by fueling up well now, and then tomorrow morning I don't have to be as sort of strict on, all right, I have to get a small snack in because I have to go to a session. Like, the session's not there, so I can just have a normal breakfast. Whereas if you are doing double sessions back to back to back on multiple days throughout the week, then it's more of a case of following that 2 meal structure is just enough to space the sessions apart so you can fuel up and recover. But then also we're minimizing as much of a crossover effect as we can. Any residual fatigue, we're hopefully sort of minimizing that as well. What I haven't covered here is brick sessions. So for all the triathletes who are watching who have done brick sessions, this isn't necessarily for you. Why? Because I personally don't really class it as a double session. I class that as a single session. You're just doing 2 sports in the one. So your nutrition is going to be a little bit different because you don't have time to stop for a meal. But at the end of the day, a brick session, the point of it isn't that we stop and we wait and then we come back later. The point of it is we want to practice running off the bike, essentially. Really, it's just molded into one session. It really is classed as a single session. I'm more talking about here where middle of the week you do a one dedicated running session like I've done this morning, and then later in the day I'm going to go out and do a dedicated riding session. They're not intertwined at all. There's no link between them. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about how I sort of go about managing athletes and my own training in terms of double sessions throughout the week. Comment below some of your strategies to work around double sessions in the day. Do you try and do anything different with your nutrition, your hydration? Do you try and have a nap during the day? It's something I didn't do today, but it's something that I've tried in the past, and it can sometimes work if you time it well. What are some of your strategies? Leave them in the comments below. Interested to hear them. Do you have any questions about how to improve your sessions when you've got double sessions throughout the week, or how you can better organize them? Also leave them down in the comments. Happy to help where we can. Again, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, and I'd really appreciate if you gave it the big thumbs up as well if you got something out of this. Otherwise, that's it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.